Coming to you from top secret field offices worldwide, these brave men and women fight a battle for truth, justice, and good, clean data. These agents of change make up the Bureau of Records, Objects, and Standards. They are the Data Bros.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Bros. Nothing but 100% good content. The Data Bros, the Bureau of Records, Objects, and Standards. Episode 8, we are joined once again by the wonderful Katie and Jessica. Katie Pryde, Jessica Wells of Books with Pictures and Penguin, but her opinions are her own, so don't even get on her about that.
They certainly are.
We are excited to get to talk more about the Comic Metadata Group, Standards
Working Group.
Comic Working Group. Oh man, my eyes froze and got big when I felt like I was getting there.
Jeff, it's the ComicsPRO Comics Metadata Working Group.
Yeah, for sure. I've got like no acronyms I'm holding on to in my brain taking space for me to be able. Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's written right there. So come on, bud. I love it. As always, I'm Jeff.
I'm
Django. Oh, Brian, we did it again. All right, let's go alphabetically. You go first.
Man.
Hey, did you notice that when I did AI, you guys stepped on each other?
Oh, it was brilliant. I loved it.
Intentional AI stepping on each other. It is pretty good. Hey, last week we talked about who we are and how we got here. This week we're talking about where we're going. My buddies, take it away.
We got this standard that we've worked up with the help of a lot of people in the industry, distributors and publishers and retailers and other software developers. And now we get to try to figure out how to implement it and kind of who's going to have to do what work in order to make it work in their systems and translate it to other systems. And what can our group do to help that?
I think also this is the point where you and I, with all due respect to everybody else, get to sit back a little bit and let Katie and Jess kind of take over for a while, because Katie and Jess kind of had brief meetings in the very beginning where they realized very quickly, I think especially Katie, we got to figure out what the actual formats and standards are before we can figure out workflows and how those standards get implemented. So this is the point where you and I finally get to take a breath and go like, and then
attend meetings.
In attend meetings
instead of remember that we have to host them an hour before.
Django or Jeff, I'm going to need you to stay late today. I've got another meeting at 1, which is when you're off. All right, cool.
So yeah, I think this is the part where we're going to work a lot on workflows and how data gets into the system. And we'll also be working a lot on categorization and how, and those are not our problem, bud.
I think too, you know, we made it so far in such a short amount of time, but in order to reach this goal, and it was quite a lofty goal, but in order to reach this goal, we had to put a lot of things to the side, primarily rules and standards around naming conventions, let's say, right? Like, what is the structure of a title? What is the structure, you know, and so there's a lot of those sorts of rules that we said, okay, that's like the pretty stuff. Like, let's do that year too. I mean, really in the past year, we stripped it down, which I think was really beneficial to us to get to this point. But we stripped it down to like, what are the required necessary fields that everyone needs to do business? And what is the format that we want this communicated in, right? So we've got the building blocks, right? And now it's about maybe doing the interior design.
Yeah. And when we presented in Pittsburgh, I think we kind of blindsided people by saying there's 108 fields. And I've had a few conversations, I know Brian has too, with people who are like, that's a lot more than I have to do right now. And I think something in the future of the COMET data standard is probably putting out some sort of press release that says, hey, I know we said 108, but publishers, you're probably only really going to be dealing with a couple less than you had to do for Diamond, you know, like until you have oddball situations, you're never going to have to use the crossover fields. Or we went pretty deep on how to describe ratio variance and qualifications for special printings in some of those extra fields. So I think just making sure that people know that, hey, it's not that big of a change. It's like rules for things you're already doing.
Yeah, it's actually less required fields than they have right now. It's 36 required fields, which I think is like 12 less than Diamond currently has.
Yeah.
So,
And let's be honest. I mean, at this point, we're probably a year, maybe two out from some of the extra fields for some
yeah,
people.
for sure.
We might
For
be.
sure.
It's an iterative process, but
Yeah.
it's about putting a stake in the ground, getting as close as we can in the new standard, and then building from there, right? So I think we also want to try to encourage the fact that it's not an all or nothing. It can be iterative so that we can move faster.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one, we need to be open to the idea that in the next, I would say, especially in the next 6 months, but also as an ongoing thing, because standards are living documents. But I think in the next 6 months, I hope what we get to do is have publishers come to us with, hey, I'm doing this cool, innovative, non-standard thing. How do I put it in COMET? And we can either say, we anticipated that, and here are the fields that you use to make that standardized, or, oh boy, that is not a thing we thought you were going to do.
Right.
We should adapt the standard in a way that actually makes that make sense. And I feel like we're at this stage where we get to take this thing that we built, not in isolation with a team of 30 odd people, but we get to take this thing that we built and we get to invite people to make it part of their work processes, which is going to be a big lift for a lot of reasons. There's going to be coding pieces. There's going to be retraining, publishing teams on it. There's going to be all sorts of things. And as that happens, our idea of the code is going to hit reality in a few different ways. And one of the things I'm really excited about is that we're going to have these monthly meetings, and we're going to have this email helpline where people can say, hey, I'm trying to give a comic that's the same on the inside, 3 different working titles. What does that mean in your system? Did you think of that? And we can say, well, hey, here's what that's going to look like. Here's how to do that in a way that by the time the data gets released as a catalog, retailers don't yell at you.
Right. It's just a little bit of a bummer and not a huge bummer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's weird, but not unmanageable, as opposed to, I feel like now there's this very open sense of like, well, we did our best and we pushed the data, and then it's like in the market and we all have to just deal with it.
And the advantage now is that it's weird. It's an exception and it's supposed to be, as opposed to looking at something and being like, is this right? Is it not right? Is this normal? Is it weird? Is it, sorry, not to use the word normal, but
data can be normal.
Like, is it standard?
Data can be normal. Is it? But for instance, we had at ComicsPRO last week, Magma Comics, which is a new publisher who's distributing through Lunar, came up and said, we're doing a new thing with our incentive covers. And the thing is this. Cover A is open order and returnable. Cover B is a more exciting artist. It's not returnable, but it is open order. Cover C is a ratio variant. Cover C and beyond to infinity. Cover C, D, E, F, G, and double Z are incentive ratios, but they are only ratioed on cover B.
And
inside the COMET Standard, we can do that, no problem. It is already accounted for.
In the in our files you can do that.
And do our point of sale systems allow for us to display that wackiness in a way that makes sense?
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's a good point too. And these conversations will help inform the entire chain.
Yeah, the sitting in and helping kind of create this whole thing has been super fun. And then at some point in the last couple of months, I had this sinking realization that we were going to have to code for it also. And it's not just a one-to-one relationship to what we already have, because there are so many things that are totally new and kind of deal with pretty complex logistical puzzles. It made me very glad that I understand it deeply. And and like we're going to have to be explaining these things to a lot of people, I think, because some of it's just delicate and hard to make less brittle because it's describing a very complex thing.
That's why we also have help@cometstandard.com. So if people have specific questions about anything involved in the standard, they can shoot us an email. And we've already had 2 or 3 emails come in so far from folks that have
it's
have
so
had questions.
exciting.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that might be the most exciting
That's
thing so
amazing.
far.
People
is
are
that
engaging.
You know, people are not just I want to help, but people are I want to help. I want to be on board with this, and I think I'm about to go off the rails. So help me figure this out.
Yeah, and in all 3 cases, I don't think they were that far off. Like they were, you're on the right track. Here's a little nudge.
Well, so one of the things that Jeff asked us was what's next, and I think we can talk about the idea of a validator, right? Like I'm hoping to get MySQL database creation code ready to put on the website so that people can start with a clean COMET Standard formatted database. That is kind of step 1. Brian, you were working on like an Excel file that could do a little bit of error checking, with kind of the longer term goal being something that people could, like a publisher or a distributor or anybody could upload a file to a validator and it would say, hey, these are problems, these are fine, but maybe you could make them better, and this is missing information, but you're not going to make the world explode with it. I don't know how long that's going to take, but I think that a tool like that is going to be super helpful when people are, you know, maybe step 1 of emailing help to see if you can have a 37-digit barcode is going to be to run it through the validator and get yelled at by the machine before you get gently chided by us.
Yeah. And if there's a validator that you can run through, you run through the validator, you get bounced out. You don't understand why you got bounced out, so you email help. Or you do understand why you got bounced out and you fix it, you run it through again and it's clear, and then you send it to your distributor. This is my dream.
Yeah.
It's the whole dream. That's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it also makes everything more portable, right? So like a point of sale vendor could export your products and you could run that export through the validator and make sure that it still meets those standards for importing to another system, whether that's another point of sale system or, you know, if it were adopted by Shopify or, you know, anything else like that, you know, everything's standardized. I guess that's the whole point. I don't know why I said that out loud.
No, Django, it's worth mentioning standardizing once again. Sorry. Yeah, whoever was that?
It is a standards podcast. That's what we're here for.
It's true. It's in the name. It's the S in the name.
But for instance, Django, I am soon going to be using Comic Shop Assistant to push my shop's inventory onto Shopify. And when Comic Shop Assistant has fully adopted the COMET Standard, which it has not yet, I assume there will be a like, here's all our data, here's the data you want on Shopify, and we push that is a like translator of COMET Standard data into Shopify data, and then we go.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Django, we just released this 2 weeks ago. Why haven't you built it yet?
I'm so mad.
I'm not really sure.
I mean,
you guys, I got sick.
I took a nap.
I got sick. He had to cover some of my shifts. I can
we went to
shoulder
Seattle
this one.
too. Django and I basically
like.
I don't know how we wound up so joined at the hip in Seattle, but it was really a joy. Like you, me, and Colette. Figley was sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went down a day.
He does that. He does that.
Every time I was texting Brian about the COMET Standard for help desk stuff, Katie happened to walk by. It happened like 3 times in a row. I'd stop.
Katie was the first person I saw at Emerald City this year as well. Like walked into the room, first person I saw was Katie. So
I'm really having a case of FOMO right now.
Jess,
you
know I went to the Penguin booth and awkwardly walked around the whole thing 2 times because I was like, she's probably not here. Like, why would she be here? But I did look for you.
We had other wonderful colleagues there, though.
Yeah,
I worked a whole shift at the Penguin Random House booth. So.
I love it. With Matthew?
No, Matthew was not working at the Penguin Random House booth. He was floating.
Doing Matthew things.
Douglas Wolk was doing a signing of all of the Marvels, and I am his appointed bookseller for hire. So I had a good time wandering around in the crowd, grabbing people wearing Marvel gear and like forcing them to go and talk.
Oh, it's amazing.
It was so fun.
Hey, some important messages coming up. Stick around.
Hi there, Carrie from Murphy's Apple Juice here, and I've got yet another exciting Murphy's product announcement for you. We realize some people have fruit sensitivities or even allergies to apples and apple products. And to make sure that Murphy's is catering to the widest possible market, we challenged our juice scientists to come up with a solution. We are happy to announce that they've cracked the case, and we are introducing Murphy's apple-free, apple-flavored beverage. Crafted from the finest Saskatchewan Saskatoon berries and flavored with a 100% apple-free but apple-flavored flavoring compound. Murphy's apple-free, apple-flavored beverage comes in a new Murphy's Core Pack Tetra Pak packaging, which uses non-apple byproducts to form our 100% compostable packaging. Murphy's apple-free, apple-flavored beverage. It's the taste, not the apples, but the taste is still pretty darn good.
Okay, let's get you back to the show now.
Comics and data, books, it's been going a direction for quite a while. And, to do what the four of you are doing is sort of, I think, without being fully aware of it, it seems like a very large ask. But then, and actually like watching it be developed and then hearing it talked about, it is less of an ask than that sort of 108 fields thing sounds like. And it's hugely beneficial to have one of the four primary members be baked from, a publisher and be able to contribute to that. How are the four of you anticipating over the next year your relationships with publishers adopting this standard? How has that working relationship been going? How has it been up to here? And then moving forward, that seems to be like one of the key components of this whole thing, right? Is people playing ball, and you are kind of turning the tides, which is incredibly important to do. But, creating this giant thing is one step, and then having other people play the game of the rules that you've made. I'm just curious, what do you foresee as that relationship going forward?
Yeah, and I would love to jump in here for a second, Jeff, just because I think that, Katie mentioned it a little bit earlier at the beginning of this week's episode, but last week, I'm not sure we iterated as strongly enough as we could have, that in addition to us on the steering committee here participating in this podcast, we had 30 plus people on these calls on a monthly, sometimes bi-monthly basis. And so it was really a group effort across all of these stakeholders. And I know that we mentioned stakeholders a lot, but just to reiterate the fact that it was a large group. Yes, we maybe guided that effort, but it was a large group. So we already have buy-in from a number of publishers, which is what's helpful about having these kind of collaborative conversations purely for standards and et cetera. No antitrust rules were broken in this process. But I think that everyone has participated in the building of this standard and has bought in by default in that way. So I think that that's a really great place to start, at least.
And I got the feeling that nobody really walked away from those conversations grumpy that their thing didn't happen, because we all settled on something that worked for them and anybody who had a dissenting opinion or a different need.
It was very collaborative. All of those
what I was
calls
just
were
wanted to
very
say.
collaborative.
I think the whole organization has made it feel like a very collaborative thing. And I think that's the best way to help other people want to be included, is to feel like they are contributing in a certain way. And I think the presentations that have gone on and the meetings that I attended and seeing all of these people and people offering their opinions that like I didn't know, and they were wonderful opinions. It's a wonderfully collaborative thing, to Katie's point. I think that approach is one of the things that sets this apart from a lot of attempts at changing rules, really in any medium, right? You got to have buy-in or belief from the other people. And I think the four of you sort of as figureheads, but the whole organization has made it really feel like a thing that comics is doing on behalf of comics.
I mean, the other thing I want to say is that there are real tangible cookies here, like there are carrots or whatever we call them. Like the payoffs are real and they're substantial. Like there is the near-term payoff, which is just more sales. It is easier to sell product with clean data. And I think that is, it's not even disputed. Like, so I feel like the less time is really where the retailers are like, we are begging for this on the retail. And the reason that this is a ComicsPRO project is because that is a way for an organization of sort of assembled retailers to say, please, our work has more than tripled and we need a way to to reduce that workload because shops are literally closing over it. Like this work has become so hard. And so that's the retailers asking for something, but publishers and distributors want us to sell more product. They want that. And so having a group of retailers say the thing we need to sell more product is better data, that's like the step one. But the step two is that what the publishers in particular really, really want is a return to sales data, which in as much as the fragmenting of the market made retailers work harder, it also put up these big blinders for the publishers so that they no longer have a clear way of looking at how much they are selling in relation to their competitors and where they fall in the market. Everybody wants to be top dog, but they don't even have any way of knowing if they're top dog anymore because the data is gone. And because of the ways that the data fragmented, there's no way to put it back together without a standard in place. So there's more things toward getting sales data. To get sell-in data, we need all of the distributors not only to be using the same standard, but also to be willing to share some consistent set of data. That's a reach. And then to get sell-through data, we need as many comic shops as possible willing to report either collectively through their points of sale or individually through some kind of aggregator, be willing to report what they're selling. Those are both big pieces that are in, I don't think this coming year, but at soonest 2025. But they are dependent on standardized data. We can't even talk about sell-in and sell-through data across distributors until we have a data standard.
Yeah,
and so a lot of the reason that these big players are willing to put their energy into this and put their IT assets and their time and their funds into this is not actually because they care if the retailers are doing 3 times as much work, although I wish they did. It's because they need these sales numbers, and we have said we cannot even begin to give them to you until we get this data figured out.
And I would even argue that, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think there's this sentiment out here that, oh, the publishers don't want to give this, or this is going to be so hard for the publishers. To be honest, I see the biggest lift here being distributors and software developers, to be honest. It's publishers, if they are printing trade product and selling trade product and they have a trade distributor, they are already very well aware of data requirements and kind of giving their trade book distributors data. Maybe they don't have that yet for single issue comics, so that will be a lift for sure. But I think it's more about the fact that distributors, we all have to abide by this new standard, right? The publishers still need to give the data to us in the same way that they're giving the data to us. Maybe we ask for more of it, and that those are conversations that we need to have and figure that out, because I'm not saying there's no change there and no lift there, because there is, but it's really inherent on all of the distributors to adopt this standard, and all of the POS systems and retail shops that have their own POS systems to conform and build something to take that in. So that's really where the lift is. And so I don't think we've had any pushback from publishers. All publishers that I've talked to have been totally on board. They're like, we already do this. We'd love to see it get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what we found really, really quickly is that, one, like you said, Jess, like a lot of them are doing this stuff for periodicals already internally. And they would mention, no, they were doing some of the stuff
for periodicals too.
Yeah,
because they were doing it for Comixology, because they were doing it for
they're already collecting a lot of this data. And we also found like champions within the organizations who wanted to push this really, really hard, and who have an opportunity to be seen in a way that data people don't normally get seen. And that is a really, really big motivator from a career standpoint for a lot of people.
Yeah. So Alex at Marvel has been an absolute joy to work with.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I'm also like, one of my goals here honestly from a communications perspective is to give those people, the data people inside the organizations, inside the distributors, inside the publishers, to give a different vocabulary for talking about where things go wrong.
Sure.
So I feel like having a standard that is in the discussion, in the conversation, means that to your coding teammate, you can say, we're having a problem with the intake of the BISAC codes. But to your VP boss, you can say, we really need more resources for COMET compliance.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing to say and might be taken more seriously than saying we're having trouble with our code intake. Like, it's just a different, if we can raise the profile of how important this is by having a public conversation about standards in general, I think that that'll really help inside these organizations make these conversations happen better.
So
For sure.
My next question, and y'all have done a really good job of sort of touching on it, is sort of who will benefit from this moving forward that we might not be thinking about. Katie, you bringing up sell-through data is like a no-brainer that I hadn't thought about, but like that's, through 6 or 7 years of ComicsPRO conversation, the idea of sell-through data and publishers and distributors, trying to get that information from retailers, incredibly important. And I'm curious, what are some other, it's clear in my mind to see the ways that the COMET standard will help my life as a retailer and the quality of my life. But what are some other avenues that you see the COMET standard helping improve the quality of life in just entirely different avenues, such as distributors or publishers? Like who will benefit from it?
I've got one for a retailer. Jeff
it.
has heard me say this 1,000 times when we're talking about our point of sale system, but with good incoming data, we would be able to do things like subscribe people to rules instead of just subscribing them to a series. So somebody could be subscribed to every Peach Momoko X-Men cover that costs less than $30. And if we could reliably have Peach Momoko covers and X-Men Family coming in, that's like free money for every single retailer that sells periodicals, right? And like, we have the infrastructure to do that, but we don't have the trust in the incoming information. So there's no reason to offer that unless we've got somebody cleaning what we get 3,000 or 4,000 different barcodes every month. A comic store goes through more barcodes in a year than a grocery store ever has at one given moment. It's a huge job to do that manually. So getting these standards in place could help us all subscribe people to rules. That's my elevator pitch for that. And someday I'm going to come up with a different combination, because I'll bet 40% of our industry has heard me say the Peach Momoko X-Men thing already.
I will tell you, as a customer who actually uses my own system as a customer, because my local comic shop uses Managed Comics.
Nice.
There are so many times where I miss something from Matt Wagner, for example, who, like, Gordon knows I read everything by Matt Wagner, but there's currently no reliable way to get all Dark Horse books by Matt Wagner. So as a customer, I think that my life will become a lot easier as well, because what I'm ending up doing most of the time is hunting that down on the secondary market for 2 to 3 times what I would have paid retail when it came in originally. So yeah,
I would just
customers are going
say,
to benefit too.
For that specific problem, you're trying to keep it with Matt Wagner, just give Brian Hibbs a call. Based on the inside of his store, he knows where Matt Wagner is at any given moment.
He's here. He's here, guys.
He's inside all of us a little bit.
In the room.
Jess, what about for distributors? Like, I understand that this is going to be really challenging to get in place, but when it is in place and whatever that winds up looking like, how is it going to make your life easier?
I mean, I was thinking about that, and honestly, it's at the end of the day, I think for distributors and publishers, it comes back to that end goal that we're all in the same boat and have the same goal of selling more books. It's all about being able to sell more books. That is the end goal. And any friction that we can remove from the data supply chain in order to sell more books is a win. At a certain point, we can then also automate when there are standards, because the way that we take in data from every publisher will also be the same. And so anything we can do to standardize just means that we can automate that much easier, and we can free up time to focus on other things to continue to improve supply chain.
The thing that I always kind of go back to when there's something in comics that makes me upset is that distributors and publishers are working with a totally different set of information and incentives than we are at the retail or the point of sale level. Right. So like, we're dealing in dozens or hundreds of copies, and the publishers and distributors are dealing in thousands and thousands of copies.
Yep.
So a little tiny, like a 10% improvement for them is a lot more meaningful than a 10% improvement for us. And I think that this is a big project for everybody, but I think like the economies of scale, when you're looking at this from that perspective and like from the perspective of time and money earned, I think that it scales really well for the amount of work that each level of the industry has to put into it.
Well
Yeah.
said.
It's actually interesting. Douglas, who is my standard proofreader, likes to remove the word stakeholders from my documents because it is technical jargon and corporate speak and not super useful in that way. And while I understand that, I do have to say the value that the word stakeholders has to me is that it reminds me that everyone is in the room because they have something at stake.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that something that they have at stake is not necessarily the same. And
That is
so
really well said.
And so the trick is recognizing that everyone is there on purpose because they value something that's happening there, but then doing the work of really being curious and investigating what that thing is and how this project that we share can serve their specific needs as well as our collective needs.
That is a really, really good way of putting it and sort of leads into my sort of wrap up thought, which is the ComicsPRO Comics Metadata Working Group.
You got it.
You rattled it off.
That was
It only took
perfect.
2 weeks.
Brian wrote it in my doc, so I've got it right in front of me here. But yeah, 1 year and 2 weeks. I think it's really impressive to be able to compassionately try to approach solving a problem that comes from your specific history of identifying a problem, but being able to bring the people in the room and approach it with an open-minded, collaborative way where you're able to show that this is a problem that is not only affecting us, but it affects a lot of people in different ways that are all totally equal. So I think that the way that the four of you have sort of led these presentations, the way that it's been approached, and then the huge collaborative effort of everyone that's been involved has been very humbling to get to watch. And it reminds me of why comics are an incredible group and profession to be in. And kind of back to what Jessica said, you know, like it's the perfect size where there can be large scale problems, but you can get the figureheads from all the different aspects of it in a room together. I think we are at a unique time in the history of this medium, and I'm very excited and hopeful for the changes that the four of you are working to make for our industry. And I hope that other people listening to this or who haven't heard of it yet are able to sort of grasp the way that it does affect their life and the way that, you know, they engage with this thing that we love. So a big hats off to the four of you and everyone associated with it. And I am humbled to get to be included in the same breath as y'all. It's a really, really cool thing. Katie, Jess, thank you so much for hanging out with us, spending an evening of your life 2 weeks separated.
2 evenings.
2 weeks.
Doing this thing to talk about and kind of show the world that this is an important thing that deserves our attention and the work into it. And Django and Brian, just my two best cuddly bears.
We'll have a tickle fight later about this.
I love you. I have a tendency to want to wind things down and do an outro, but I think we're doing those later, so I'm going to step back and let Django and Brian figure out how they want to end this. Oh,
I love comics and I love this team. And
I have so much fun with y'all.
This project has been genuinely a joy in a way that it honestly has no business being.
Well, I don't know if you guys know about the Magic podcast, but we forgot to do our outros. Jeff already left. Or maybe he's
fellas. I'm here.
Oh, there he is. Jeff's still here. I'm Django, usually Django Boren, or sometimes Django himself on most social media. Comic Shop Assistant, which is the point of sale Jeff and I do, is on Facebook and I don't know, probably other places. I don't think we have a Twitter account because I don't like the Twitter.
It's X now. X.
Oh yeah, I don't like to X. Comics Place is the comic shop that Jeff and I run together. That's easy to find on almost all social media. Somehow, Brian, I don't know if you know this, we're the only store named Comics Place that I can find, which...
How is that possible?
I don't know, man. I think because it's not a great name.
That means you don't have to refer to yourself as Comics Place in Bellingham, Washington anymore.
No, we're still going to do that. We're going to keep doing that. Comics Place in Bellingham, Washington. We do that when we call locals to tell them that their order's ready to pick up.
Hey, this is the Comics Place from Bellingham, Washington. Your order's ready for pickup.
We'll see you in 20 minutes.
That's beautiful.
Tell them where to find you.
I am Manage Comics on most platforms. I'm on, I know, Facebook. I'm positive Instagram, perhaps X, YouTube for sure.
Ooh.
Maybe the TikToks. I don't know. I think I like to TikTok, but I'm not. Oh, your TikToks.
I have a TikTok, right?
Yeah.
What is it's
pretty good TikToks?
Pretty good TikTok videos is what it is.
TikTok videos.
Pretty good TikTok videos. That is not a data thing. That's more on the comedy side of things.
It's pretty funny though. And, hey guys, I'm Jeff at comicsplace.com, and also I got a Venmo, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, Jeff. Jeff.
It's fine. Next week, look Jeff. It up next week, bud. You can tell us what it is.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. I love you guys.
Love you too, buddy.
Jeff, everyone can write into. I want to ask Jeff.
Get him, Jeff. You're making him laugh so hard.
Tell the folks where they can get us to stop.
Oh, I got you, Brian. Right into podcast at databrosinc.com. You can review our podcast on whatever service you use, and tell your nerdy friends to subscribe on whatever service they use.
I can't breathe.
Next time Brian's going to do that, it was his job in the script, but he's too busy laughing at his Jeff joke. He hasn't even been able to say the Jeff joke. I don't know what's got him laughing so hard. Thanks to Jess. Thanks to Jess and to Katie for being on here. And
it's a very serious podcast, folks. Very serious.
Tight 30. Oh, Brian, I gotta send you something. I'm gonna send you some sleep talk that I had that belongs on here. It's pretty good. Well,
stay tuned after the extra, and you'll hear some sleep talk.
The Data Bros is a joint project from the teams behind Comic Shop Assistant and Manage Comics. Data Bros are Django Brian, Jeff Figley, and Brian Garside. Brian Garside produces and edits the episode. And you'll find more about the Data Bros online at databrosinc.com. Subscribe, like, and review the Data Bros on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm trying to turn 11 back into 11 because right now it's 11.